All right, students, let's talk about multiplying tips and tricks and dividing tips and tricks. If both numbers are positive and you multiply, they're going to stay positive. Same thing with division. If both numbers are negative and you multiply, they're going to turn into a positive. Same thing with division. If one of them is negative, so if you have one negative, it's going to be negative. Okay, so the rule is going to be, it's kind of all related. Like this whole section right here, right here, right here has kind of the same theme. If there's one negative, it's going to keep the whole thing negative. And that's true when you have more than one negative. Okay, here's the rule, friends. If you have an even number of negatives, it's going to turn into a positive. That's why two would make a positive, two make a positive, two make a positive, two make a positive. One makes a negative. One makes a negative because one is odd. Okay? And then if you have an odd number of negatives, it's going to be a negative. So a quick example, let's say I had -2 times a -3 times a -4 and then times a -5. Okay? 1, 2, 3, 4 negatives. So these first two would cancel, and then these next two would cancel, so you'd have a positive 120. Or if you just know ahead of time, if you count the evens, oh, there's an even number of negatives, so basically they're just going to go away, they're irrelevant. It's going to be a positive 120. If you had a -1 times a -10 times a -5, oops, -5, there we go. 1, 2, 3. There's going to be 3. 3 is odd, so it's going to be a -150. -150, what am I talking about? -50. Silly goose. Here we go. Got ahead of myself there. Here we go. All right, cool. So follow those rules. It's the exact same if you have groups of dividings, okay? The only trick is if you have groups, again, if you have two, most of the times you'll see two. If you have a negative on top and then a negative on the bottom, which is kind of like over here. They're both negative, and it's just going to be A over B. All right? So just kind of be careful. You could have something like this. You could have like a -A times a -C over a -B. 1, 2, 3. Okay, it's going to be negative. So you think, okay, this one cancels this one. There's one B left over. Sorry, excuse me, one B. There's one negative left over, and it looks like this one. So again, right here, friends, almost all of this stuff right here is almost all the exact same rules. There you go. All right, let's talk about fractions. Fractions and multiplying and dividing are probably the easiest of all the fraction operations because you simply multiply. Oops, that's not a multiply sign. What's going on here? You just multiply straight across, okay, when you multiply fractions. So a quick example, I think I'm going to use the 1/2 and then the 5/7 again, but this time I'm doing multiplication. If you're doing addition, you have to have common denominators and all that gross stuff, right? Here's what I do. I connect the fraction bars, and then I multiply straight across. I give myself a blank fraction bar for my answers to land. 1 times 5 is 5, and then 2 times 7 is 14. And I win. Simplify if needed, but you won't always. Also, you can simplify before you multiply. So let's say we have like a, I don't know, how about a 3/7 times a 1/6. So you can multiply straight across, okay? Before you multiply, you can also wax out the extra number. So there's a 3 and a 6. So you could wax out this 3, turn it into a 1, and turn you into a 2. Because both the 3 and the 6 can be divided by 3. So maybe I should write that down. What did I do up here? I divided this guy by 3. Oops, that's not a 3. That is. And then I divided this guy by 3, right, really small. There we go. So then 1 times 1 is a 1. 7 times 2 is a 14. Okay, so you could have multiplied and simplified, or simplified and multiply. Just always reduce, 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 reduce. Almost every single time you do math problems for myself, I'm going to ask you to reduce the fractions. Okay, what about dividing fractions? I think there's this thing that most teachers talk about. They call it KCF. It almost looks like KFC, which makes me hungry. Keep, change, flip. Is that right? Yeah, keep, change, flip, or something like that. There's a lot of teachers that talk about that. Let's say we're doing 50 divided by a 2/3. Okay. Let's see here, what we got here? We got a 50 divided by 2/3. So we don't actually divide by fractions. We keep the first one the same. Or maybe it's maybe it is KFC. Why do I have KCF? No common factors? What is going on here? I'm so confused. That's it. This is going away. Maybe it is KFC. I got confused. That's probably why I don't use those analogies very much. KFC. There we go. Keep, flip. And then what's the C stand for? Comply, multiply? I don't even know what's going on here. I'm just going to delete all this noise. If you know the actual analogy, let me know. But I just remember flip the second guy and multiply. So that's what I say. I just say flip the second guy and multiply. So I'm going to take you times a 3/2. You don't actually truly divide fractions. You actually multiply by the reciprocal. All right? You multiply by the reciprocal of the second fraction. So what do you mean reciprocal? You flip it. Okay? Then how do you take a whole number times a fraction? Easy. You change the whole number into a fraction by putting it over 1, and then you're right back to where we started up here. Multiply straight across, multiply straight across. 50 times 3 is 150. And then 1 times 2 is 2. Simplify that, should be a 75. Okay. Again, like I did right here, I could have simplified first. Could have made you a 25. Could have made you a 1. 3 times 25. 1 times 1, you get the idea, okay? So make sure you are always reducing your fractions. And then students, if you can solve the mystery of what KCF, it says this in the notes, keep, cross, flip, I don't know. If you can figure out what the mystery is, I have this written down, so it must have been an analogy that I just don't use anymore, so maybe it's just too old. But if you can figure out what that is, let me know. It's in the notes, so help me with that. Anyway, otherwise, follow your rules on positives and negatives. Multiply straight across. You never actually truly divide fractions. You flip the second guy, and then you multiply. All right, see you in class.